Next speaker who came specifically for this event, and I'm very, very excited to present Simon from Axiom Space. So a little bit about Simon. He's the ecosystem manager here in Bulgaria for Axiom Space, and he'll be telling us about how Axiom Space will help Bulgaria get to the stars again. And the floor is yours. Please, applause.
Dobro utro. Am I getting audio come through? Do you guys hear me back there? Okay. Testing. There we go. Lovely. Okay, dobro utro. I appreciate the invite. I didn't come far. I am based in Sofia. As Lachazar said, my role is ecosystem manager. What that means is I work across a number of countries around the world, trying to help build their space ecosystems, and then one day get each of these countries back to space via an astronaut program, or get involved in our space station in some way. I accepted this event because a number of reasons, but one of them was the SGAC connection. So the Space Generation Advisory Council is a really important organization. I think Lachazar gave a really good intro to it, but one of the really important things that SGAC does is provide a voice of the youth in the space industry to the United Nations. So there's a direct connection between SGAC and the UN. I think that's very powerful. So whenever I get the opportunity to speak at SGAC events, I'll always take them. So very glad to be here, very glad to be in Plovdiv. I can't stay all day, unfortunately. So if you want to pick my brain after this presentation, I'll stay until lunchtime. So try and snatch me up then. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today about who Axiom Space is, what we do, and then I'm going to tell how that relates to my efforts here in Bulgaria. So first, perhaps let's start with a show of hands. Who here knows who Axiom Space is already? Not many. Good. You will after this. Let me give you some history. So the International Space Station is orbiting Earth about 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. It is a scientific vessel. It is one of humankind's greatest achievements, both geopolitically and technologically. But it is a machine, and that machine is getting towards the end of its useful life. So by about 2030, the end of this decade, the expectation is that the ISS will be deorbited. The partner nations that had come together to build the ISS originally are still going to want to maintain access to that low Earth orbit environment, but they're going to be turning their eyes more towards the deep space exploration, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. The intention is that commercial entities come in and fill that void within low Earth orbit. So commercial entities like Axiom Space will be replacing the services that ISS has been doing for the last 20 plus years, but then expanding beyond that. It's like any frontier. Typically, governments or a royal family or something like that will send out an exploration organization. They'll go to a particular location, and then after that, once they've declared it safe and worthy of visiting, that's when organizations, companies come in afterwards and really build up the economy there. We've seen this throughout all of humanity's history, and we're seeing it again in low Earth orbit. So, Axiom Space's mission is to improve life on Earth and foster possibilities beyond it by building and operating the world's first commercial space station. Our vision is a thriving home in space that benefits every human, everywhere. Before I go too much into this slide, let me tell you very quickly what we do, and then I'll come back in this in a little bit more detail. So, Axiom Space is doing three main things. Firstly, we're building the world's first commercial space station. We're building the successor to the International Space Station. I'll show you some slightly out-of-date pictures of where our construction is up to, but it's important to know that everything that I'm telling you about today might sound a little bit like science fiction, but this is all actually happening. We're living in a really exciting time in humanity where all of this isn't actually science fiction. The second thing we do is private astronaut missions. So Axiom Space is the only company in the world that is currently sending private astronaut missions to the ISS. We've sent 3 missions so far, and I'll talk a bit about those. Our 4th mission, our 4th crew, is in training, and we'll be flying future missions thereafter. And the 3rd thing we do is connected to our lunar efforts. So we're the only company in the world right now that is building space suits for humanity's return to the moon. So when NASA returns to the moon as part of the Artemis 3 mission, Axiom is building those spacesuits to keep the astronauts alive and safe and functional. We're also involved in efforts to build a lunar rover as well, and we'll be turning our sights more towards lunar activities as well as the low Earth orbit stuff. So I will jump firstly into our private astronaut missions. So each of our missions we call AX, short for Axiom. AX1, 2, and 3 have flown so far. AX1 flew in 2022. Each of our missions has a crew of 4. It's 1 Axiom astronaut as the commander. So we have hired some very experienced, some of the world's most experienced astronauts to come and work for us. So for the first mission, it was commanded by Michael Lopez Alegria, a Spanish-American who worked for NASA for many, many years and is a former Navy test pilot. He took a crew of 3 privately funded individuals. So these gentlemen were from Israel, the United States, and Canada. So each of these astronauts paid their own money to go, but then they donated their time in orbit to scientific endeavors. It's important to know that each of these missions are science missions, regardless of whether it's a private individual that is self-funding their mission, or whether it's a government that is paying an astronaut to go there on their behalf. All of the missions that we fly are to develop humanity's understanding of science. So that flew in 2022. Our second mission flew in 2023. It had a crew of 4 again. This time it was commanded by Dr. Peggy Whitson. By most accounts, she is NASA's, in the US, most experienced astronaut. She has the most days in space for an American. And luckily she keeps adding to that because we keep flying her on more missions, which she's very happy about. In the second mission, she flew with 1 privately funded individual from the United States and 2 Saudi astronauts. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail later. Our third mission, which flew at the beginning of this year, was the first all-European mission. Commanded again by Michael Lopez Alegria, as I mentioned. He's Spanish-American. And he was joined by 3 crewmates. 1 from Sweden, who flew on behalf of the European Space Agency, as well as astronauts from Italy and the first Turkish astronaut. So let's talk a little bit about AX1. This is the first time that a fully private crew had ever visited the ISS. So it was pretty remarkable. Our crew worked alongside the ISS crew. We did our best to help each other. But the important thing is we are using these missions as precursor missions. We're learning to understand how we work with NASA and how we work with ESA and the other ISS partners. Because at some point in time, our roles are going to switch. We're not going to be customers of theirs visiting their station. They will be customers of ours visiting ours. So it's important that we understand the rules, understand what it's like to work together. AX1 is the first time this ever happened. As I mentioned, this was a scientific mission. We flew about 25 science experiments, and we had over 100 hours of outreach activities. For all of these scientific experiments, we work with global partners. You can see some of them listed up there on the bottom of the slide. There are a few key moments from this mission. Firstly, they got some extra time, which was lucky. They had overloaded themselves with the amount of research they wanted to conduct. And where it was supposed to be a 10-day mission, they were very lucky to have terrible weather at Florida when they were supposed to return. This actually enabled them to finish off their mission research profile. This is not an unusual circumstance. If you're familiar with human spaceflight, delays are inevitable. Each of our mission launch dates have been delayed multiple times due to weather. Each of our mission returns have been delayed due to weather. So it's just something that you need to take into account when you're dealing with sending humans to space. So importantly, each of these astronauts devoted some of their time to outreach activities for their home countries. I know that Israeli astronaut connected with almost every single Israeli student through his outreach activities. And importantly, when he's come back from space, he's created a research organization, almost like a private space agency as a non-government organization, in order to use his mission and the knowledge gained from it to connect and educate Israelis in space. AX2 mission, launched in 2023. This was unique as well. It was the first time that a private crew had ever flown with a government crew. So we had a self-funded individual. He focused his mission on science, on aging research, as well as on cancer research. But he also brought art into the mission as well. So he ran an art competition prior to his launch, and he took some of the winning art pieces up to space with him. It was also unique because it was the second time that Saudi Arabia had visited space. It was the first time that Saudi Arabia had gone to the International Space Station, and it was the first Saudi woman who has ever visited space. Similar to the AX-1 mission, the Saudis had a fantastic outreach program. They were able to connect with every single Saudi student during their time on orbit through downlinks, and you can imagine the type of inspiration that that's giving young Saudi girls to see a Saudi woman astronaut in space talking to them directly from orbit. Again, it was a scientific mission. The focus for the Saudi astronauts tend to be some technology demonstrations, as well as a lot of life science research, understanding how the human body lives and operates in the spaceflight environment. Again, we work with a number of partners. It was a shorter mission, and we still managed to cram in a lot of the research. So over 20 outreach activities and 26, I believe, payloads that we flew for experiments. And then our AX3 mission. So this launched at the beginning of this year. The first time that an all-European mission has flown to space, and the first time that an ESA astronaut has flown with a private organization, Axiom Space. So this is the start of an ongoing relationship between the European Space Agency and Axiom. We are pleased to hopefully fly an ESA astronaut on every one of our future missions. It was also important because it was the first Turkish astronaut. It was remarkable watching some of our live streams during the mission, and the comments were just dominated by proud Turks seeing their countrymen in orbit for the first time. A scientific mission, again, I won't go into all the detail of the science there. It was a very ambitious scientific mission. They were lucky to have, I believe it's 17 days on station, 18 days on the ISS. And to show the impact that these missions are starting to have, both our Turkish astronaut and our Italian astronaut had the opportunity to speak to their country's leaders from space. So the Italian astronaut spoke to the Italian Prime Minister. She was in the Colosseum with a live feed while he was talking down to her from space. The Turkish astronaut spoke to the Turkish president. This was live streamed for the whole country to see. I don't have a slide on our AX4 mission, but I can tell you a little bit about that now. So our fourth crew is in training right now. They're in Houston. It consists of an ESA astronaut from Poland. So this is the first time that Polish astronaut has gone back to space since part of the Intercosmos program. So like Bulgaria, Poland were part of the Intercosmos program. So are Hungary. We are flying a Hungarian on this mission as well. Again, the first time that a Hungarian has gone back to space since the Intercosmos program. And then the final astronaut is from India. This is the first time that an Indian-born, an astronaut wearing the Indian flag has ever visited the ISS. India's become a space power. They're probably the world's fourth space power, and they have very ambitious plans. Having an Indian astronaut join an Axiom mission to go to the ISS is a precursor for all of the rest of the activities that they're undertaking. Sometime, hopefully next year, they'll be launching a crew of 4 Indians on their own spacecraft. So this is the start of an ongoing relationship between our company, but also between India and the ISS. Part of my job is to fill our future seats. So I'm talking to countries now about our AX5 and our AX6 missions, which we don't have a definite date on when they will fly, but we've been flying a cadence of about 1 mission per year so far. So we can expect it would be about that. It just happens to be that I'm in Bulgaria. Of course, I would love to see a Bulgarian on a future Axiom mission. Maybe somebody in this room. All right, I'm going to jump now to talking a little bit about Axiom Station. So our main job, the reason the company was created, is because we recognize that with the ISS coming or having an end date, there needed to be a replacement. And our founders recognized that there was no one in the market who was credible to replace the ISS. Now, our founders were very credible. Our chairman was running the second biggest engineering services provider to NASA for a very long time. He sold his company to the first biggest engineering services provider and made a lot of money. That was convenient because he went off to start a number of space companies, like Axiom Space. You may have heard of Intuitive Machines as well, who are having a number of successful lunar missions. And a co-founder, Mark Safradini, ran NASA's ISS program as a program manager for over a decade. This included while NASA was putting the ISS together. So no one knows more about space stations, or no one knew more about space stations than these two guys. They built a fantastic team around them. I joined Axiom 4 years ago when the team was about 60 people, and we're now somewhere over 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200. So, how are we doing this? We were lucky enough and maybe skilled enough that in 2020, NASA awarded us a contract to grow the habitable volume of the ISS. So NASA has contracted us to build a module to make their ISS bigger. We are scheduled to build our first module being a habitation module. This will increase the ISS's capabilities by being able to house 4 more astronauts. We have sleeping quarters and research facilities on this module. This module is in construction. I'll show you some photos in a minute. Our second module, and that'll be launched in 2026. Our second module is going to be a similar module, another habitation module that could house another 4 astronauts. We'll expand our research capabilities with that, followed by a third module, which is a dedicated research and manufacturing module. The manufacturing part is important there. And I'm going to come back to that on my last slide, I think, where I talk about why this is important for Bulgaria. If I don't, then someone remind me. And then our final module to be self-sufficient is our power and thermal module. I say self-sufficient. This is not going to mean that Axiom Station is complete, because we have the capability to keep growing and growing and growing until eventually we disconnect from the ISS when it comes down to deorbit. And maybe at some point we house tens or hundreds or maybe even thousands of astronauts on Axiom Station. Each of the modules that we're constructing is in effect its own miniature space station. So whilst our modules can be integrated, they can also be separated. This is important because when it comes to growing the station indefinitely, some of these older pieces can be pulled off like a piece of Lego and then replaced with some more modern technology. So probably about 2030, we're going to be ready to be self-sufficient. And you can see that construction is happening. We've engaged one of the world's only organizations capable of constructing the pressure vessel of this size, Cleanaway Space in Italy. So they are building the pressure vessel. For those that don't know what a pressure vessel is as it relates to space, it's very simple. Think of it like a tin can that is keeping space on the outside and habitable volume on the inside, oxygen, life support, etc. So they're building the shell, and then it gets shipped to Houston. When it gets to Houston, our team have been hard at work building the solar panels, the windows, the life support systems, the propulsion systems, all the interior fit out that makes it a comfortable environment. So this will be something which will be finished and then launched towards the end of this year. Towards the end of 2026. And then there's a slide there, I've already discussed this, about Axiom being a free-flying space station at some point in the future. And then I've already discussed briefly our lunar ambitions. So NASA has contracted Axiom Space to build the lunar spacesuits for humanity's return to the moon. We're working off some very hard work that NASA has done as part of their own program. You may have seen some of the videos of Apollo astronauts trying to navigate the lunar surface in their quite cumbersome spacesuits back in the day, back in the 50s and 60s. These are really awkward. When they were constructed, we were using a very old technology, but also we didn't really know what it was going to be like, what the challenges were that we need to design for the lunar surface. Now we do. Now we've got a good amount of knowledge from all these Apollo missions that flew up there, and we've been able to take that knowledge into account to build a much more advanced version of a spacesuit. What is interesting is that we can use that same spacesuit architecture almost identically for our own space stations. So as we're building Axiom Station, we will need the ability to have EVAs, spacewalks, out of our space station to conduct maintenance, but also because customers want to do that. So we'll be able to offer to our customers in the future the opportunity to go out and experience the view of Earth or the view of deep space with just the visor between them and the spaceflight environment. I'm lucky enough to work with a few astronauts, and each of them has had the opportunity to do an EVA, a spacewalk, and invariably, when you ask them what their favorite thing about space is, it's that. It's spending time out looking down on Earth outside of the space station environment and just experiencing that for themselves. So what are we doing for our spacesuit? So we are having much improved comms. So we've recently signed a partnership deal with Nokia. Nokia is going to be providing high bandwidth capabilities to the lunar surface. They're launching a base station on our sister company, Intuitive Machines, next mission. And then that base station will be able to provide 4G LTE connectivity to our spacesuits. Now, what does this mean? This means that we can live transmit ultra high quality video directly back to Earth. We can equip our spacesuits with some intelligence. So we can have a head-up display which feeds a lot of real-time data to our astronaut as they're conducting science on the mission, on the lunar surface for their mission. Our life support system is state-of-the-art. Basically, these spacesuits are mini space stations. They need to have all the same facilities, but miniaturized into a backpack. Our team has done an amazing job compartmentalizing that and miniaturizing all these facilities. Our gloves are a significant advancement over what was used in the Apollo missions, including some tactile sensors. The helmet and visor will feature a head-up display, so the astronauts will be able to get a lot more information, and at some point in time this might be increased to some sort of goal-seeking type display as well. So you can imagine if you're trying to really make the time on the lunar surface efficient, you don't want to have the astronaut to have to guess about what they need to do next. They should have all the information there, and this can include quite literally on their head-up display arrows showing them where they need to be walking, overlays over the type of things they need to be experimenting with, all the information they need for their mission right up there in front of them. I won't go into the layers and the moon boots. Suffice to say that we're working with partnerships for each of those, including working with Prada and their advanced materials organization in order to provide advanced materials for our spacesuits, as well as making it very comfortable for our astronauts. Now, in other versions, this is a video. I don't think I've included a video here because we were having some technical issues. So let's jump to why this is important for Bulgaria and how Bulgaria can get involved. First and foremost, I want to see a Bulgarian astronaut in space. It's been a very long time since Bulgaria has had cosmonauts in space. I'm seeing an audience of a variety of ages. Perhaps some of the older people in this audience remember this, and it's probably quite realistic for some of the older people in this audience to have grown up knowing that becoming an astronaut or becoming a cosmonaut was a realistic career path. For some of the younger people in the audience, that may not have been the case. My job, and the job of the people in this room, everyone who is interested in this, is to make sure that that dream becomes a reality again. Now, it's quite easy compared to what it used to be. Rather than having a country have to create all of their own indigenous infrastructure for a human spaceflight program, we at Axiom can do most of the work. We can assist with the astronaut selection, we can do all the astronaut training, we train at the same facilities as NASA astronauts train in, and basically we can get the country fully equipped to conduct a valuable, value-add scientific research mission. It's important that this has a return on investment for the country. So we would make sure that as we're working with the Bulgarian government, that the research, the technology demonstrations that we do in orbit can move Bulgaria forward to become a leader in certain aspects of the space industry. We are early enough in the commercialization of space that countries like Bulgaria can still become a leader within that. And this is where it's important. I wanted to come back to space station, and I want to come back to the commercial aspect of this. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is if we look at the ISS, as I mentioned before, the ISS is a research spacecraft. It's taxpayer funded. The money to build and operate and maintain the space station has come from a variety of governments, but it's come from the pockets of everyday individuals. What that means is there is very limited ability to commercialize that space. If you were, for instance, an American citizen, you may not think too kindly about your tax dollars going to a large company making huge amounts of money in space off of the thing that you have funded. This is where private space stations really show the value. With the 20 plus years of research that's been conducted in the ISS, we've gained a huge amount of knowledge for humanity. Much of that knowledge is around how the human body responds to the weightlessness environment, the microgravity environment, and the spaceflight environment in low Earth orbit. But we've also begun to understand how materials can act differently in low Earth orbit. This means what we've discovered is there are certain things that can be created in space that can't be created here on Earth. Materials that are superior to those that can be created on Earth can be created in space. Fiber optic cables, as an example, can be created which have 100 times improved performance over those here on the ground. Anything with a crystalline structure that forms a crystalline structure will form more perfectly in a weightlessness environment, and that can be exploited for commercial gain. This includes pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals can undertake drug discovery. So trying to find out, I'm not an expert in this, but most drug discovery is about a lock and key mechanism, right? You have a problem, someone has an issue, this is your lock, and you're trying to find the right drug that can fix or improve or something that's your key. By doing this in a spaceflight environment, you can do this more rapidly. Where this is important for a pharmaceutical company is that you reduce your time to market. So for cancer drugs, for instance, we can cure cancer more quickly by doing this sort of research in space. So I might leave it there and open it for questions. I'm going to leave you with the thought that it's the people in this room and it's people watching on the live stream that can come up with these smart ideas to use microgravity to their advantage. We are looking for partners to come up with these great ideas. This is like the dawn of the internet, where there were a few organizations that put together the backbone, the hardware, the infrastructure that created the initial internet. And then a lot of smart people came afterwards and developed applications. Much of the things that we use the internet for today were probably never considered by these pioneers that were building the technology, building the infrastructure. Similarly, we're not trying to come up with all the smartest ideas for how to exploit microgravity, but we are providing the real estate. We are providing the access, and we're providing this access to more countries, more organizations than have ever had access to space before. So this is why we're seeing kind of the dawn of, we are seeing and will be seeing, the dawn of access to space for many countries. All right, Q&A.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? Oh, we have a question here.
Hello. Thank you for the amazing presentation. I really wanted to ask, what was the type of material that the spacesuit was made? And we also saw that the spacesuit was black. Is there any specific reason for that? And I mean, we're used to seeing spacesuits which are white,
Yep.
probably connected with absorption of the ultraviolet, or actually the refraction of most of the rays. So can you please explain why the suit is black and the physics behind that? That would be great. Thank you.
That's a fantastic question. So I'll answer the second question first. Firstly, our lunar spacesuit will be white for the very reasons that you think. If we have black spacesuits, we're going to be cooking our astronauts, which is not that great. We spend a lot of money training our astronauts, and we don't want to cook them on the lunar surface. Why do we have a black spacesuit? It's because we have versions of spacesuits for the lunar surface, but we have to train our astronauts as well. We have versions of spacesuits for the ground. Has anyone here watched the TV show For All Mankind? Excellent. You might have seen, so I haven't, no spoilers. We actually engaged the costume designer for the show For All Mankind to help us with the outer design, the look of our spacesuit. So the black spacesuit that you see there was developed in conjunction with her. It looks very cool, and for the ground-based training of our astronauts, it is something which is perfectly acceptable. These astronauts were doing a lot of training in a simulated lunar environment in pools. So this is the type of spacesuit you'll see them in. But yes, the lunar version will be majority white. We're a commercial company. We like our colors on there as well. So you see a bit of orange and blue. To your first question, what is a spacesuit made out of? Many things. Like, it's about 7 or 8 different layers, I think. And I can't tell you all the different layers. I'm not equipped with that knowledge, and I don't think I would be allowed to share it if I was. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Might wait for the mic so it comes through on the live stream.
So if I remember correctly, during the shady part, the moon becomes extremely cold. So how do you keep batteries and other equipment working and prevent them from getting damaged by the extremely cold temperatures? And what are the temperatures during the sunny part and the shady part?
Yeah, so that's a good question. During the day, when there is sunlight directly on the moon, it gets extremely hot. During the shade, it gets extremely cold. It's also very similar for operations at the space station as well. So this is why we need to have such advanced materials to develop our spacesuit. This is why we have so many layers, including insulation layers to protect our astronaut. This is similar for the equipment, the backpack for our astronauts. So that it includes essentially thermal protection layers in there so that the equipment can function at the appropriate operating temperature. You're welcome.
Other questions?
I wanted to ask a quick question about what Bulgaria's role could be in building that infrastructure as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bulgaria so far has been working mostly, our ecosystem is mostly connected with actually providing subsystems and systems to other existing platforms and programs. So my question here is, what role does Bulgaria play in actually building that infrastructure in terms of what companies actually are doing now, and are they actually supporting the work of Axiom in that way? Thank you.
Yep, another great question. So let's look at this from a couple of different perspectives. There are a couple of ways to get involved. The first is from a customer perspective. So by Bulgarian startups or research organizations or big companies, if they want, to identify a niche market to create things in space. So this becomes a revenue generating opportunity by creating a widget or creating a service or something like that in space, which is better than what could be created on Earth. And then Bulgaria could become a leader in that. This is where you can tap into that huge body of research that's already been conducted aboard the ISS to pick apart those options. The second way is supply chain. Supply chain is something that we are trying to be frank, every country that we work with wants to be part of our supply chain because they want to be able to say that they are involved in this efforts. Our team works very quickly. So this is one of our challenges. We would love to say to some of our partner countries, hey, we're going to need you to create this part of our station. But if you think about how that might work, there would then be a pretty long procurement step. Probably this country would want to partner with a number of their organizations in country, build a consortium, and then eventually together build that thing. We're in the same time, we've already finished and moved on to other things. Back in the early days of when I first joined the company, like I said, it was a really small team. So our engineers would have a problem on Friday. They'd go and tinker in their workshops at home over the weekend and come back with a solution on Monday. And when you're working at that pace, it's difficult to get people involved in componentry. Now, if we take a bit of a longer view at what the involvement could be, I would look to development of a module. So we are open to partnering with organizations, be it countries, be it companies, in order to be part of Axiom Station. So there are many conversations which are happening already around that. And this is where there could be a European module which Bulgaria could contribute into. Or if we look even more locally, maybe there could be a Balkan module. It's about working out, where do we get a critical mass of sufficient capability and sufficient demand in order to build that module and attach it. And it doesn't need to be doing everything. Like if there's no life support system expertise in this country, no worries, we know how to build life support systems. So we could do that bit of it and the country could build the rest. Does that answer your question?
Cool. And I think last question.
And in the same way, I just want to ask you, because in the beginning of this year, I had 2 webinars with NASA in the Opportunity of Small Business program, and they thought that the process of improvement, it costs usually between 6 and 18 months. And the programs that they had, it's about 5 years long. And I want to ask you, how much time will cost to you, and should we have to use mentor protege like their program mentor protege? Should we have some kind of mentorships like proteges? And can we directly send some ideas to you if it's in the early stage? I mean, if it's not technical readiness to fly in the orbit.
So I think
Thank
you've
you.
highlighted the difference between a government organization and us. So yes, we've spoken before about your idea, which you've sent through the NASA program, and you're probably right, like 5 years runway to get something like that happening. 5 years ago, what are we, 2024? 5 years ago, we didn't have a single piece of hardware built, and now we're almost ready to launch a space station module. So we, by necessity, have to work much quicker than some of these slow government organizations. The reason why we are building the spacesuit for NASA's return to the moon is because NASA got so far, but they realized that their pace of progress was not going to meet the timelines. They had to put it out to the private entities in order to work more quickly. As for how organizations can get involved and send ideas to us, we don't have an easy way. I'm sorry. There's not like there's a submit your great idea on our website, which goes to our engineering team. So at this point, I can't really answer that one. From the mentorship perspective, that sounds awesome. I'd love to do that in Bulgaria. I'd love to do that in all the other countries I work. We don't have anything set up yet, but this is something which definitely I'm open to conversations, because one of the important things for me personally is knowledge transfer. Like if I can do something while I live in Bulgaria to help Bulgarians get more involved in the global space ecosystem, that's amazing. So yes, I'd love to talk about that. How are we going for time there, Lachaza?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Please applaud Simon.
Thank you, everyone. If I didn't get to your question, then you can catch me during the break or during lunch.